All right, which one of us wants to handle it? Either of us can I guess. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick at 5 Reasons Sports. We got Louis Sung. You can follow him at Louis D. Sung. And we got Michael Quirk. He's in and out right now. The Miami Dolphins were not in and out today, although they kind of got in and out of D.C. or Landover without many problems. 45-15 against the Washington Commanders. Well, they only beat bad teams, right? But they really do beat bad teams. Our guy Chris Early is here as well. You can follow him at the Earl007 after his Italian lunch. Pretty much, Lewis, like everything went about as well as you could have hoped, I guess, with the exception of the Baker injury, which we'll get more about. Friendly fire from his own guy, Brandon Jones, which is unfortunate. And then the injuries, I mean, to Armstead, which we know that's a given. And then Robert Hunt gets hurt again. But otherwise, Tua was practically flawless. Tyreek Hill had 2 huge plays. The running game was good. The rookie comes back and looks like he didn't miss a beat. Like, no problems with the knee, finishes it up late. And Andrew Van Ginkel, man, like, if there were any concerns about Jalen Phillips and whether they were going to miss him, of course they're going to miss him. He's really good, and he was playing at a high level. But they got his sack from Agba, and Van Ginkel makes 3 game-turning plays that I counted. He was just everywhere today. And then on the outside, Terry McLaurin didn't have a catch. We talked before the game, like, Terry hasn't been so scary lately. I didn't think he'd go 4 targets without a catch. This is just total domination. And honestly, we said it. It's what they should do. I wasn't sure they were going to do it. I think I had the closest score on the pregame out of anybody. This thing was not close from the very beginning. So, Lewis, to you, single most impressive thing today from them?
Oh, most impressive thing by far was how the defense rallied together, especially behind, like, we thought that, well, honestly, I was saying even earlier this week that the loss of Jalen Phillips, yeah, it hurts. Obviously, I feel bad for the kid. And just real quick, Mike, I don't know if you have your camera on or not, but it's just a black screen, bro. I don't even know if he's there. All right, I'm just going to until he gets back. But in any case, Andrew Van Ginkel, by far, is honestly, he's probably one of the best players on defense right now for the Dolphins. And that is not an exaggeration. And that is even including having Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, even having Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer and Andrew Van Ginkel. It is no coincidence that Vic Fangio went out of his way to personally call Van Ginkel and say, you need to come back because I have big plans for you. I recognize your talent and I want to make you into something special. And that is exactly what Van Ginkel is doing. Whether the Dolphins are able to re-sign him this season or not, I'm going to go ahead and say right now, the answer is not. This is his last year in a Dolphins uniform, and it's not because he doesn't have a place here. He obviously does. It's going to be because this season he has outplayed whatever the Dolphins could afford to offer him. And some team somewhere is going to look at Andrew Van Ginkel and say, we don't want you as just a role player. We want you to be one of our top pass rushers. We want you to be one of our edge players that we rely on game in and game out. And he is going to get sacks. He is going to make incredible plays on the regular. And every Dolphins fan around is going to miss him because he has done incredible things with whether he's spelling Jalen Phillips, whether he's getting work in as an inside linebacker. Andrew Van Ginkel is one of the most valuable players on this defense, and we better use him while we can and enjoy him while we can because I don't think the Dolphins are going to be able to afford to bring him back next season. There's just not enough money for what he is performing here. So it's either Van Ginkel takes an extreme hometown discount to come back to play in Miami again, or just root for him wherever he goes as long as it's not within the division. You're muted, sir.
I said the important thing as Michael returns here is that they have him for the next few weeks. Chris, I want to stay with the defense here for a second because we'll get into the offense a little bit as we go forward. But it was mentioned by, I don't know, Schlereth or the announcing team essentially that they hadn't mentioned Xavier Howard or Jalen Ramsey's names since introducing them, which is usually a pretty good sign. Like, I mean, I feel like not to have Javon Holland today, and yet there was really nothing over the top for the Reds. I almost did. I knew I was going to do it. For the Commanders at any point today, it seems like as long as the back end is in good shape here with Ramsey and Howard on the outside, they're fine defensively.
Yeah, I thought Xavier Howard had a chance at a pick on that one play. I think he lost the ball, just lost track of the ball. Because they were both kind of tracking, and then he turned around and it looked like he lost it. Then he made the play to break it up, but I thought he could if he'd have kept with it, he could got a pick there. But yeah, without Javon Holland, those guys pretty much shut down the Commanders. They had a couple of big plays that got some yardage, but a lot of it was broken tackles. They had that one on the final possession, the final not the very last possession, but the final possession where they were backed up in their own end zone. Bradley Chubb had the running back down at the 1 yard line, and he breaks out and somehow gets the ball 9 yards. So they had some big plays, but yeah, the defense just kind of, we kind of expected that. This was a rookie not a rookie quarterback, but a second-year quarterback, inexperienced. And I'm pretty sure Sam Howell didn't want anything to do with Jalen Ramsey. So he didn't really want to have much to do with Xavier Howard either. So I'm just looking kind of at the stat line. Curtis Samuel had 5 targets. Antonio Gibson had 5 targets. Jahan Dotson had 5 targets. And Terry McLaurin had 3, but no catches. So it looks like they were just willing to. The Dolphins were like, well, we'll give you a few things underneath, but we're not letting you try to make any big plays. And I'll give credit to Sam Howell. He should have been sacked about 12 times this game and somehow didn't. So good to him. I hope the Commanders are able to build around him. The offensive line was awful. He was under consistent pressure. I don't know how often the Dolphins blitz, but it didn't look like they were doing it much. It looked like it was just the main guys. And as good as Andrew Van Ginkel played, he didn't have a sack. Somehow Howell got out of that one that he got. And according to the stat sheet, they gave half a sack to Bradley Chubb and 1.5 to Zach Sealer. So, but nonetheless, one other defensive stat that's kind of disappointing, but it's whatever. This is the first game since Carolina that the Dolphins defense has allowed 100 or more yards rushing.
Yeah, that was the one thing that they did get going a little bit, and then Brian Robinson went out with the injury at halftime. They still ran the ball reasonably effectively, although they totally screwed up my prize pick with the reboot on that one because Robinson was almost at his number at the end of the first half. Michael, on the offensive side today, the Heat. I did again. I do this. I just did Dolphins on a Heat podcast. Now I do Heat on the Dolphins podcast. The way that this game started, first thing, I feel like the Dolphins win the toss every week, every single week, and then and they always defer, but always they're going to give the ball up. I thought their first defensive possession they established things, but then the way that they come out with Tua hitting Hill on the big play. I thought, the first throw I didn't think was as difficult as the second one he made to him. I know people are talking about the adjustment that Hill made on the second one, which was a great adjustment with the ball in the air. But also, Tua was kind of flat-footed on the second touchdown throw to Hill and still got it out there. I counted 52 air yards. I don't know how anybody can say at this point that he can't make a deep throw to Tyreek Hill. We're seeing this week after week after week while we're watching Justin Herbert throw behind the line of scrimmage.
People are still saying that? People are still saying that?
People are still saying, just check Coward's feed tomorrow.
His name must start with S and end with a B because there's no way.
Hey, but to put a quick
let me go to Michael on this. Your thoughts on Tua overall?
Yeah, we were being a little nitpicky the last few weeks with some of the decision making from Tua, and it seemed like the timing was off. I know it's the Commanders. I know they are a terrible football team who just fired their defensive coordinator. But still, Tua looked to have tremendous pocket presence today, felt the rush really, really well. And he really stayed on rhythm. And so the numbers here, 18 for 24 for 280 yards, a pair of touchdowns. As you already mentioned, the tremendous deep balls to Tyreek, one an insane throw and another one. The bleep it, Tyreek's down there somewhere for 6. And I am never going to lament Tua for that throw. So it's good to see, the offense controlling what they can control. again and getting back into rhythm. And there was a drop from Jalen that really stunted one of those drives on first down, and then got into a third and long from there with a negative play with Tyreek. And so, you have to feel good about where you're at. And we're talking about the National Football League scoring 45 points, especially when you go full vanilla in the second half and don't have a lot of that starting offense in the fourth quarter. Yet another game over 400 yards and gave up no sacks. I know that Montez Sweat and Chase Young are not there anymore, but hey, that zero in that column, after what we've seen in the last few years, I'll take that.
Well, it's crazy. We're talking about 400 yards as if it being nothing, right? And what the Steelers went like 3 years without a 400-yard game until they finally got one. So I do feel we're kind of taking this for granted a little bit. You mentioned the protection, and that's a key thing because it's working in tandem right now, where not only is Tua getting the ball out quickly, but also we saw the side steps at least twice where he got out of trouble and made a play. So if you look at what's happening here, it's a combination, I think, of great work by the Dolphins and by the new offensive line coach to kind of get these guys prepped up no matter who's playing game to game, but also the ability of Tua to make plays in there and not allow the sacks, or when there are sacks, not to mitigate the damage. Also, clean sheet for Tua today. There was not the big mistake. We've talked about you always assume one. I even said before the game I expected to go over at half the interception. That didn't happen. His first 3 incompletions, at one point, I think he was 12 of 15, and 2 of the incompletions were receiver error. It was the one where Tyreek fell down, and then the other one where Jalen had the drop. He was virtually perfect today. Lewis, I know that Jerome Baker has not been the most popular player with Dolphin fans at times, but they don't have a ton of depth at that position. Duke Riley got the reps today. That looked to me like that's going to be a long-term injury. Just the way that he was taken out. We'll see. They characterize it as a knee. How do they cover up for him? You've already lost Phillips. Now you're talking about 2 of your starters on your front 7 potentially.
Well, I'll just say this. If I'm the Miami Dolphins, I would go ahead and try to be the dark horse to try to sign Shaq Leonard. I know that the reports have been that he's going to basically choose between the Eagles and the Cowboys. I feel like that Chris Greer should make a call to Leonard's agent and be like, hey, guess what? We just lost one of our guys. You want to try to come here for a contender? I get it. The Eagles, the Cowboys, they are contenders in and of their own selves. And probably if I'm Shaq Leonard, if I'm trying to push for a Super Bowl, I'm looking really hard at those Eagles. But Miami is no slouch. And at this point, if he were to come to Miami, he would definitely have a role. There is no doubt about that. On a lot of other teams, especially now, Shaq Leonard would help tremendously if he is healthy. I would at least try to kick the tires on that. Jerome Baker does a lot more than anybody's willing to give him any kind of credit for. I don't know what he was doing trying to cover, who was it, Curtis Samuel, one-on-one. I don't understand that logic, but sometimes matchups happen and they're not great. Brandon Jones, I'm not going to get mad at him because, again, he's just playing hard. He didn't mean to crash into Jerome Baker. You want your guys to be able to give it everything they've got, so I'm going to respect him for that. But what happens now with Jerome Baker, either the Dolphins go out and get somebody or they're going to have to rely on Duke Riley to be a backup for a while.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about linebacker depth all year, and also on the defensive line, we didn't see. I saw JPP was dressed. Did he get snaps, guys? Because I didn't see.
He did
I
at
saw
the
him
end of the
talking to
game.
you on the sideline. He did.
He was on
the
on the last drive where basically they were just running to end the clock. So I saw him there.
Okay.
I don't know if he got any meaningful snaps.
I would figure they'd ramp him up a little bit more going forward. I also thought it was good that they got Wilson some carries, Mostert, and again, you get the Rook some carries too. And I thought he looked good today. Let's talk about what concerns we would have. I'll let Michael and Chris kind of go back and forth on this. You're looking at you got another couple games here that should be reasonably easy, right? I mean the Jets game. It looks like Trevor Simeon's going to start next week because they gave up on Boyle already. Or when next time? Wait, they play the Jets next week, correct? Am I right on that?
No,
Or
they
am I
play
getting ahead of
they
myself?
play the Tennessee Titans on Monday
No,
night.
it's Titans next week and the Jets the week after. So it looks like it's going to be Simeon in 2 weeks. It looks like they've given up on Boyle already. Unless they go back to Zach Wilson, I don't think it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. But I mean, you're talking about two teams with the Titans and the Jets that can't really throw the ball. So again, I think that the Dolphins would tee off. Do either of you guys have any like pressing concerns with this team, or is it just until they see Dallas, until they see Baltimore, and until they see Buffalo? I'll let either of you jump in.
Yeah, for me, it's filling in where some of these injuries are popping up. We saw earlier in the year when Armstead was battling some injuries, when Jackson was battling some injuries, seeing how well that second unit for the offensive line was filling in, and you'd like to see that moving forward with some of the guys going down in the secondary and on that second level of the defense. But Andrew Van Ginkel, pretty decent game today, had an all right first quarter, I'd say. So making sure that depth is able to not be a glaring weak point, because of course when you get to later on in the season and into January, where the Dolphins appear to have a collision course you're going to need to, everyone's going to be banged up. And so you're going to want to make sure that you have guys like Van Ginkel stepping up, that you have guys like Brandon Jones stepping up and so forth. So for me, that's the only real thing I'm looking at. I posted on Twitter a few weeks ago after the Bills lost that Monday Night Football game that all the Dolphins have to do is do what everyone says they do, which is beat bad teams, and just have Bills drop, a game or two, which they already dropped that overtime game to the Eagles. They have the Chiefs next week in order to clinch that division. So theoretically, the Dolphins could clinch with just winning the next two games and having the Bills lose next week to Kansas City. And at that point, that's when the meat of the schedule comes on with 3 tough games to end the year. You do want to see the Dolphins even just prove it to themselves that they can hang with those kind of teams right before you get to January. So that's really all for me, is just making sure that depth is there, that you secure that division, and then in those last weeks, as you're fighting for potentially that number 1 seed, that you can prove to yourself that you can beat those kind of top tier opponents.
Well, Chris, I mean, the same questions about the Dolphins and the questions being asked about the Cowboys, right? Like that. I mean, it's the same narrative here, is that they don't beat anybody except the teams that they're supposed to beat. So it feels like there's a collision course between those teams. I know when we talked about other concerns, it was the 3rd and short stuff, the 4th and short stuff that didn't really come up today. Like they were ahead on the sticks anyway. Like I didn't think McDaniel had to make a lot of difficult decisions. He had the one challenge early. He always loses his challenges. He burned it in the first minute and a half of the game. But I mean, did anything come off of today that would worry you in any way, other than obviously, the offensive line injuries and the Baker injury?
No, they did what we've been wanting them to do for a while. Let's play a clean game. They didn't have any turnovers, aside from a few big plays. Once that happens, in games, so it's not a big deal. I'll echo what Michael said. It's about the injuries. You can do well against teams like Washington, who are, what are they, 4-9 now? They're not a very good team. They're a top 5 draft pick. But you play teams like Dallas and the Baltimore and Buffalo that are going to get after the pass rush. You want that offensive line to be good. And they did show Robert Hunt and Teron Armstead on the sidelines, and they didn't look like there was any kind of issue. And given the nature of the game, they probably weren't going to come back in if it was just even a minor thing. So to the point that, well, the Dolphins aren't beating anybody. Well, they're beating the teams that they're supposed to be beating. And the one thing that, if this was a same old Dolphins, this is a game that's probably like 2017 and they eke it out in the end. They won 45.
What I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
that's what I said on pregame.
Yeah, they won it 45-15. It wasn't even close.
Right.
It was a sleeper. This was like, I'll go do some other stuff and see what happens. And even then, they had that final drive. I think there was one pass attempt from Mike White. They ran the ball. So they're trying to get a balanced attack. They need to get rid of some of these plays that weren't working. They ran that little like pitch out reverse, whatever. Whatever kind of play. I can't think of it right now. But just that kind of stuff they got to, clean up. But get guys healthy. The Baker injury, I think, is going to hurt worse than they realize, because he's been playing very well. He's the captain of the defense. He wears the green dot. So he's been playing every snap of every game. So they're going to miss that. But they're also going to miss his run fits. He got beat in coverage. That happens. But they're going to miss some of that stuff. One option might be to play Brandon Jones more. Just play like basically a big nickel or a big dime package and let him fill in as that other linebacker. But I thought Duke Riley played well given the circumstances. He got out there and made some big stops. And these were not easy running backs to bring to the ground either. They have Washington, despite what people will say about them, they have some talented players, skill players on the offense. So they need to look at something moving forward, maybe bring in Leonard. But the injuries are the biggest concern. I'm not worried about the schedule. Beat who you're supposed to beat. You can't play anyone but who's in front of you. And, don't get lax with it. Don't go into Tennessee, who's they're in overtime right now, but they're 4-8 or something like that. Don't let a team like that keep it close. Blow them out of the water like you should. And one other point I'll say about that. Andrew Van Ginkel scored as many points today as the Chargers. So I don't care how many good deep balls Justin Herbert can throw. You can't put up any more points than our linebacker.
And that's against New England.
Yeah,
which is also a terrible team.
I don't care who it's against. You got to put up more than 6 points.
There's a lot of narratives that, if anybody's been paying attention, have been destroyed this year, one by one by a lot of the same people. Lewis, I'll just ask you right now, though, because obviously this is talking about beating the teams you're supposed to beat, and they have to, right? And I don't know why they don't get credit for that, because when teams lose to those kind of teams, they're like, well, then they're not very good. If they lost to that team, that's not good. So if you beat those teams, I think you should get credit for them, particularly if you do what you did today. But ultimately, this is going to be about beating the good teams in the playoffs. Like, that's where you're headed, regardless of where you're seated. So I'll just ask you right now, okay? It looks like Jacksonville's pretty good, okay? Baltimore's at least pretty good. And the Chiefs, because of the guy under center, are pretty good, okay? Do you think the Dolphins are as good or better than those teams right now?
They're on the same echelon. I don't care what anybody says about who they've beaten and who they haven't, because all these other teams that we're talking about. I was having this discussion last night when I was attending a annual church dinner, and they were talking to me about how, the Dolphins haven't beaten any really good teams, and I just stared at them and said, yeah, and all the other teams have lost to bad teams. And they didn't have a counter for that, because that's the honest truth. If you want to discredit the Miami Dolphins victories because the victories come against teams that are not considered good, then you have to look at all these other teams that have lost to bad teams. Yeah, and they may have beaten some other good teams along the way, but how do you excuse the terrible loss that they had before? The Eagles are about to play the San Francisco 49ers. Will they win that game? There's a very good chance that they will. That doesn't take away the fact they lost to the New York Jets led by Zach Wilson. It still happened. You don't get to erase what happened because that's the team that you happen to like. So we all know how it goes down. Certain people like certain teams better than others. There's always going to be this underlying discussion about who's really good and who's not, and it's going to be based on who they personally like. The Dallas Cowboys, right? I was surrounded by Cowboys fans, by the way, at that dinner. I don't know why there are so many Dallas Cowboys fans in Miami, but whatever. So I was having the whole discussion about it, and they're saying, well, yeah, the Cowboys haven't really beaten anybody special either. I'm like, okay, but why do the Cowboys get better treatment than Miami overall? Because it's the Dallas Cowboys. It's America's team. It's the Big D. It's everything that you say about Dallas that just makes them such a big market in NFL circles. So, of course, they're going to try to favor that team. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I told them straight up. They said, oh, we're going to beat Miami when we face you guys in December. I'm like, you might want to think about that, because we're in Miami. And Miami, the Dolphins are kings. And so any concerns that you had about whether they're going to beat a good team or not, every time the Dolphins have lost so far this year, it's been on the road. They lost to the Eagles on the road. They lost to Buffalo on the road. And who was the other team? I can't even remember. They lost to Kansas City in Germany, which based on what we were looking at in the stands, just a crimson sea. It might as well have been a road game anyway. It doesn't matter. Kansas City basically bought out all the tickets before any Dolphins fans even had the chance to pull out their life savings to be able to make that game. So,
and honestly, Lewis, they might, and again, mights and buts and ifs and whatever's, but I mean, Tyreek had his worst game by far, and basically coughed it up before the half, and yet they still had an opportunity at the end of that game. They made two critical mistakes on the last drive, or maybe that thing looks different. They played with the Chiefs, again, they looked like they were on Kansas City's level. They didn't look overmatched by them. One thing I want to get to here before we go, first thing I always want to mention, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, make sure you guys are playing Prize Picks. Use the code 5, FIVE. Might be a little bit too late here for the Chiefs-Niners game, but you can get in before Sunday night and also before Monday Night Football. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. I had a rough day on there. I was so close on a couple. I don't even want to get into it, just reboots and all kinds of other stuff, but there's always another day. But I want to close with this here, and we appreciate all our commenters. We're trying to get through some of these too. I don't see anything new on there. We'll get to them. The offensive lineman injuries piling up. They've piled up all year, though. They've piled up all year, and they've mixed and matched. I thought it was interesting that Kendall Lamb didn't go in at left tackle today. Your thoughts on that? Be real quick, Lewis, before we get to this other thing. What was the reason for that?
Keon Smith is playing very well, and they're trying to get him reps. We already know what Kendall Lamb can do. We already know he's our main swing tackle. But Keon Smith is doing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's fair. I was curious, but it does show you they built some depth at the position. You got to give Greer credit for that, because that was the single biggest concern coming into this year, I think, for me and for most people, was the offensive line, and particularly the offensive line depth. But look, they're 9-3 for the first time since 2001. Okay. I covered that team. I mean, I'm old. The 22 years ago. All right. I mean, Jay Fiedler was the quarterback of that team. Dave Wannstedt was the head coach. That was pre-Ricky Williams trade, I believe. They traded for Ricky before the 2002 season. And, of course, that season fell apart when Jay got hurt. And I was in Denver, 24-22. They won. They're 5-1. Jay got hurt. Gadsden got hurt. Chambers got hurt. And Mike in West Palm, can I say something? I never thought I'd be able to say I'm sleeping through these Dolphin games. I have no worries. Chris hit that point. They were in total control today. Like, there was never a concern, I think, from beginning to end that Washington was going to make a push on them. I don't usually feel that way. But you go back to how far. I mean, that was a Jason Taylor team, a Zach Thomas team. You're going back 22 years on this. It's significant. Okay, and now you look at Mike's record. What is he now? 18-11 in the regular season over the past 2 years. The record by percentage is much better, obviously, when Tua starts. Like, I think it's fair to say this is a good football team. Like, and I think it's okay at this stage to enjoy it. I have them at 11-6 before this season. At this stage, 11-6 would be a disappointment. I mean, that would mean that they go 2-3 down the stretch. I think 12-5 is kind of the floor here right now. And so I'll close with all you guys on this. Where do you think this finishes? Their last 5. We know that they've obviously got the Ravens. They got the Ravens in the mix, and they've got and the Cowboys in the mix, and then a Bills team that may be playing for nothing, honestly, at the very end of the season. Can they go 4-1? I mean, can they finish with 13 wins? 13-4 would be a really good season, Michael.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've seen it's sort of like those prognosticators with CNN and Fox News and so forth. I've seen enough from the Tennessee Titans and from the New York Jets. So I'm going to count win there. So that gets you to 11-3 with 3 games left of Dallas, Baltimore, and Buffalo. At that point, Dallas, as y'all have mentioned, has the same concerns on who they're beating on their schedule as Miami. And they have not run the ball as effectively as they thought they were going to, making Tony Pollard a lead back. Also, that the defense, again, has suffered a ton of injuries. It seems like their linebacker room's just been cursed since the dawn of time. But I think Miami has a very, very good chance to win that game. Dak Prescott is prone to making a big mistake, and the Dolphins defense is very good at being opportunistic there. Buffalo figures to have nothing to play for at the end of the year, while the Dolphins could still be fighting with Jacksonville or Kansas City or Baltimore for that 1 seed. So I think that's a very winnable game. Obviously, it's going to be horrendous conditions for that Buffalo sideline my thoughts and prayers are already with them and all that they'll have to endure from that big yellow ball in the sky. Baltimore is probably the one that I'm the least bullish on, even without Mark Andrews. I really, really like that defense at Baltimore. So right now, I have Miami finishing at 13-4. I think 12-5 is entirely possible. I think 12-5 is probably more likely than 14-3, but I think 13-4 is right there in the realm.
Yeah, I mean that seems fair, Chris, right? Like, I mean, I think most fans would be disappointed if they don't win in 4 of their last 5 at this
Yes, and
stage, with probably Baltimore being the most likely to lose, I would think.
and 4 of the last 5 are at home. So
Yep.
the Baltimore game will be tough, but they went up there last year and had that great game in Baltimore. It's going to be strength on strength. It's going to be the best rushing offense versus the best rushing defense, or one of the best rushing defenses. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, I'm in agreement. I think 12-5 is kind of your floor. I mean, you've got to beat the Titans. You've got to beat the Jets. That gets you to 11-3. If the Bills lose one in between there, that's the magic number is 3. So Dolphins get 2 wins and the Bills lose one. That's 3. We get the division, and then you're playing for seeding. Dallas, they showed that stat. I didn't catch it during the game, but I kind of briefly heard them talk about it, that their record on turf is fantastic. When they play at home, their record on grass is not so good. So that's going to be a road test for them. Miami's wearing the aqua throwbacks, so that's going to be awesome. That's got to be worth, like 1.5 on the spread. So, yeah, I mean, this team, the defense is playing well. They're running the ball very effectively. That's January and February football, and it's only going to help if Miami gets a home game. And it looks like that's what they're going for. So, I said it. I've been saying it for weeks. Just take care of business. You got to 6-3. You hit the bye week, and you had this stretch of 5 games versus winnable teams, and they're 3-0 at this point. The next 2 are at home against those, and you get the Cowboys at home, and you get your one road game, and then the Bills. So, just it's going to be fun. I want to say one thing statistically. Devon Achane has played in 4 full games. He is only 1 touchdown away from having as many touchdowns as the Jets offensively have as a team. So, yeah,
you should tweet that, Chris. You should get that out there, because I think anytime we can make fun of the Jets is a good day. Lewis, would you be disappointed with 12-5 at this stage?
12-5? No. Okay, here's what we have to remember here. Right now, we are looking at a situation where we're going to take a look at results. We're going to say, oh, well, the Dolphins didn't do this and the Dolphins didn't do that. I don't care. Win the division. That's step 1. Step 1 is win the division. And it looks like the Dolphins are well on their way to do that. You get to 11-3. You beat the Titans. You beat the Jets again, which they will beat the Jets again. Make no mistake about that. The Jets still can't even score a touchdown. I don't think they didn't score a touchdown in this game either, did they?
Nope.
So, nope, another failure. They took out Tim Boyle to put in Trevor Siemian, and that didn't help. So that's going to be an absolute beatdown of historic proportions, I think. And I don't think it's I don't think it's too early for me to say that. With that being said, if they end up losing to Baltimore, okay, they lost to Baltimore. If they end up losing again to Buffalo, okay, fine, you lost to Buffalo. All I care is whether or not, do you win the division? Yes, you got a playoff game. Who are you facing after that? Who's next? Because that's where that's as long as you can get to the playoffs, all you have to do is keep doing what you've been doing. Beat the guy in front of you. All you have to worry about is that. Once you have clinched your playoff berth, I don't care what happens after that. As far as I'm concerned, unless there's like a home game on the line, rest everybody. Throw in Skylar Thompson at quarterback. I don't care. I want everybody to be good to go. I don't want the Dolphins limping through the playoffs like they did against Buffalo last season when you had Skylar Thompson, Lester Cotton literally coming off the street to start for Miami, and all these other dudes who somehow they still almost managed to beat them in Buffalo. I want to remind everybody about that. They still were almost there. I don't want that to happen again. If the Dolphins end up sacrificing a couple of games because, with just a point of pride about the Dolphins beating playoff caliber football teams, who cares? Who really cares? Get healthy, Keep Teron Armstead good to go. As far as I'm concerned, the man can sit out the rest of the regular season. We don't need him anymore right now. We can sit out Robert Hunt for the rest of the regular season. We don't need him right now. Sit out Devon Achane. Sit out. Well, we're not going to sit out Tyreek Hill. He's chasing 2,000 yards. But it's like everybody who's important, we don't need him anymore. Just clinch your playoff berth, clinch the division, clinch your home game if that's what you're aiming for, and sit everybody down. I don't care about narratives where the regular season and the Dolphins not beating good football teams. Doesn't matter. We're in the playoffs. You're not. Deal with it.
By the way, before we go here, guys, have we done the Tyreek Hill counter? Is he still on pace? I was looking. So he came into today at, what was his number here? He came into today at, I don't think this is getting enough national attention, by the way.
Tyreek Hill is currently at 1,481 yards.
All right, so
that's after this game. That's including this game.
Yes.
So let's do the quick math, guys. That's 14. This is through 12 games. He's at 1,481. So here, we're gonna handy dandy. This is what this is for. Let's see what he's at. All right, so 1,481 divided by 12 equals, he's averaging 123.4 per game times 17.
He needs to get at least 100 yards per game minimum.
104 yards. 104 yards a game.
Yeah. Yep. 2,098 yards he's at right now. So, and for those who are going to say that, okay, it's a 17 game season. If it was a 16 game season, he'd still be on pace for 1975. So he'd still be pretty damn close. All right. For Lewis, for Chris, you can find it the Earl 007. For our guy, Michael Quirk, Eric Wadicki was on the pregame show, which we appreciate. Check out Prize Picks, use the code 5 FIVE. Check out Inside Leverage on Playback tonight. I wish I had an exact time. If you have the Playback app, just download from free from Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. It's a great app, and just have a good time with them. They're going to hang out and talk about this win in the future as well. Good day, everybody.